Hi, everyone. Welcome to Quality of Life, Easing the Burden. Our panelists are going to be joining me in just a moment. They'll be hopping on, but while they're logging in, I want to make an introduction on who we have joining us today. So this is Quality of Life, Easing the Burden. We have with us Taylor Burhow. She is a social worker and behavioral health specialist at the University of Utah Specialty Clinic's Imaging and Neurosciences Center, where she works in a multidisciplinary setting. She specializes in working with families and individuals affected by rare and chronic neurological conditions. Nice to see you, Taylor. We also have Dr. Richard Kravitz. He is a professor of pediatric pulmonary and sleep medicine at Duke University, and he's also the co-director of the Duke Neuromuscular Program. His clinical interests are caring for the respiratory and sleep-related complications seen in patients with muscular weakness and technology-dependent children. Thank you, Dr. Kravitz, for being here. Also, Marisa Penrod. Marisa is the co-founder of the Duchenne Family Assistance Program, where her team believes that every child battling Duchenne deserves resources and education, needed equipment, approved treatments, and access to the best care. Marisa is also a mother to a young man named Joseph, hence Team Joseph, who lives with Duchenne and is a freshman in college. Congrats to Joseph. She's also the creator of the podcast, Making Your Way. Good to see you, Marisa. And then last but not least, Lori Safford. Lori Safford is an advocate and mother to Ben, Sam, and Lydia, 3 young adults affected by Duchenne. After receiving her MA from Simmons College in Communications Management and working for Fortune 500 companies for almost 2 decades, Lori and her late husband, Mike, made the decision for her to stay home after having 3 kids in 3 years. Wow. She enjoys volunteering at her church at New NH Cornerstone Action and for Joni and Friends by going overseas to help others with disabilities whenever she can. So great to have you guys all with me this morning. This is going to be quite a conversation, I'm sure. So we're going to go ahead and just get us started. I have a question I want to kind of point to Taylor and just kind of level set some things for the community today. So can you kind of just talk us through what is burden? You know, who can be affected by burden in a family navigating Duchenne? Kind of what are those areas? But yeah, get us started if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to see everyone. You know, I think, I mean, if we talk about like the actual physical definition of burden, it refers to like a heavy load. And I tell patients and their families when they're diagnosed with Duchenne or any other type of neurological condition that it's not just an individual diagnosis, that it's a family diagnosis, and that the whole entire family, the whole entire community often is very affected by it. You know, if you have or you are affected by Duchenne, that's no surprise to hear. But I think that oftentimes our medical community and just our community at large doesn't necessarily make that connection that it is like a family kind of large scale diagnosis. Functionally, I think that can look like a few different things. Obviously, the individual who has been diagnosed is affected in a number of ways. The caregiver is obviously affected as well. And there is, you know, language and research and kind of acknowledgement of like caregiver burden and caregiver burnout. And I think there's also some additional invisible burden associated with the diagnosis for other members of the family. For other siblings, non-affected siblings, it can look like the sick or well child syndrome. Well child syndrome, for example, would be, right, if you have an unaffected child, you know, there's a lot of like awareness and understanding that this is a burden on the family, burden on mom and dad, and children will do whatever they need to do to feel accepted and to feel loved. And oftentimes for an unaffected child, that looks like, you know, a lot of pressure to not be a burden, not be an additional burden to mom and dad or to parents, caregivers, whoever is involved in the family. That can be like not coming to caregivers with like their own problems or struggles, not disclosing like emotional difficulties that they're experiencing, just doing everything they can to not add to what they perceive as already a really heavy burden on the family. That can affect a lot of different things, friendships, school. That can look like negative coping skills in the unaffected child, trying to find any way to kind of have an outlet for feelings they don't necessarily feel like they can bring to caregivers, knowing that they don't want to cause additional burden. So that's something to look out for. Obviously, it goes without saying that an affected child is experiencing burden for a lot of reasons. I think kind of a little bit more of an invisible burden is what we call like the sick child syndrome, which is really parents not able or having a lot of guilt and shame in terms of implementing boundaries with that child, with the affected child. And so they're not able to kind of develop the emotional connection, emotional skills, boundary relationships with others because parents feel, carry around guilt in enforcing or holding boundaries with that child. And then obviously the caregiver burden, that one is profound and robust, and it goes without saying how difficult that can be for anyone who's involved in the caregiving process to take care of themselves, to put themselves first over the affected child. There's a lot of guilt and shame associated with that, especially for moms, because they're often associated with guilt of giving the child the Duchenne. So those are just some functional ideas in terms of what does burden look like. It is an entire diagnosis for the entire family.
No, I appreciate you highlighting that, Taylor. The family, because I talk about it often. It is a family condition. Like, it affects every aspect of every component of our family and our friends. I mean, the extended family. So I'd love to hear, kind of Marisa, Lori, Dr. Kravitz, some of your thoughts on things that we've navigated in talking about burden with families and coworkers and friends. And anyone want to jump in?
I will add, just after what Taylor said, I was listening, and my Joseph is 19, so I've been in this for 14 years, and so I've heard a lot of this and I've lived it. But just hearing what Taylor said, I started to feel like almost my chest tightening, like, oh my goodness, there's a lot to this. And I think just from a really personal point of view and from experience, that one of the most valuable things that I found in dealing with what we call the burden of navigating this journey is just to be really gentle on ourselves and to sort of celebrate that we're really imperfect and we're not going to get it all right all the time, or most of the time, or maybe any of the time. But my mom always used to tell me there's no instruction manual for children in general for giving birth to any child, let alone a child with Duchenne. And my mom always used to say, honey, just lead with love. Just love them, and whatever that looks like, and not the emotion love, but the verb to love, that action. And I've had to kind of turn that on myself as a caregiver, and figuring out how to navigate what is not a sprint, but a really long marathon. And I think it's being gentle, and I think it's giving ourselves grace. And I know we're going to talk about some specifics, but I think that's kind of a critical context in which to have these kinds of conversations.
I think I would add also that we're not islands unto ourselves. We can't do this alone. And I'm a type A personality. I have always, wanted to do it all, and you just can't do it all. And I think some families or some children, Duchenne children, who maybe don't want anyone to care for them except for mom or dad. It's not a good thing as they get older. They need help from other caregivers. There's a reason that airline stewardesses say, put your oxygen mask on first and then take care of your children. You have to, like you said, give yourself grace. You have to give yourself margin in your life. You can't do it all. And that looks different for every family as to where you're able to get the help and assistance.
Yeah, and I think bringing it back to like the basic needs, right, for us, like going into survival mode, and how can we manage this better? I'd love to pull in Dr. Kravitz, kind of, talking about just sleep, getting, sleep and the impact of sleep for the whole family too. And how does that weigh into, everything here?
Yeah, well, let me add a couple points to what Taylor and the rest of the panel were saying, and then I'll segue that into sleep.
Yeah.
Good setup, thank you. I mean, when we're talking about burden, everything is really in the end about maintaining a good quality of life. And it's not just a quality of life for our boys with Duchenne, but it's for their families, their parents, the caregivers, their siblings, their family network. Anyone who's taken care of anyone with a muscular dystrophy, it's a labor-intensive disease. There's a lot to do to keep your child healthy so they can optimize your quality of life. The question is, how do you diffuse that burden? How do you do what needs to be done, but still take care of yourself? And every day is going to be different. Every day a sick day might be different than a well day. A day when you're a lot under pressure for yourself, you might not have the time to do as much for your son as you want. And you have to realize it's all a balancing game, that every day you have to have a good balance. And I think the word having a little self-grace. We had our our neuromuscular clinic on Friday, and I spent one young boy who was 5, who's doing great. And we were going over the medical checklist, and it's like, oh, I still need to get his flu shot. Oh, I need to get these refills. Oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. And mom's going, I'm sorry, I'm just so busy. It's like, you got a really healthy looking boy in front of us. He's doing great. You're doing a great job. Be easy on yourself. You don't have to do it all at once, but you know what you have to get done. But don't put yourself under this pressure. And by the way, are you taking care of yourself? Having these conversations, it's important. But you have to take care of your child, but you have to take care of yourselves. Husbands and wives need time together as a family. And the children, as Taylor said, who are not affected, at least from a pathophysiologic perspective, are affected by siblings who are ill. What can they do to help out? Sometimes that's active helping, sometimes that's getting out of the way, but they shouldn't, their needs are important and need to be addressed too. And believe me, the boys with Duchenne are thinking about their unaffected siblings. So it's all family. Open communications, the comment about leading with love and showing love, I think is a very excellent way of phrasing it. And no matter what we do, we can always do more, but we can always do less. You just do the best you can. Okay. Now, segueing, you can't do the best you can unless you're well rested. How was that? Okay. First of all, we're Americans, and by definition, we're all sleep deprived. I mean, I have sleep clinics, and I've got kids that have no medical comorbidities. I have kids that have other medical problems that are mild to severe in nature. Everyone doesn't get enough sleep. And it's not just the patient, it's the family. So, but when we look at sleep, we have to look at, really, if you think about it, 3 groups. The child who's affected, the parents, and the siblings. And if everyone's not reasonably well rested, the system's going to be stressed. And what might be this is much of a problem is going to start seeming like this much of a problem. So we need to get good rest. Now, I'm a sleep doc, I'm a lung specialist. I focus a lot on BiPAP and airway clearance and all that stuff. And that's really important, don't get me wrong. But these are kids, and they have to learn how to sleep, and they have to have good sleep hygiene. And so a lot of kids that have muscular dystrophy have regular sleep problems. It has nothing to do with their muscular dystrophy, but everyone says, oh, you have muscular dystrophy, I have to see everything through that filter. No, they're regular kids that happen to have muscular dystrophy. So look at the regular stuff that kids have. The kids who keep coming into the bedroom, the kids who keep calling the parents back in, but there's nothing really wrong. That doesn't necessarily mean there's something organic wrong with the child that needs to be addressed. Maybe there's something emotional, maybe it's some behavioral component. So you want to look at the child not just through the filter of having Duchenne, but what is age appropriate for a child this age. Yeah, some of them need to have some respiratory support at night, and you want to make sure you have the appropriate intervention. If they need help with BiPAP to breathe at night and they're not getting that, or they're refusing to use it, they may be more tired the next day. They're more tired, that means they're weaker. They're more weaker, you have to do more as a parent. So what can we do to try and break that cycle? Parents, the same thing. You're up all night. You're always, worrying about your child. Many parents said, my kid won't sleep through the night. He's always doing things. And I'm like, well, how do you know this? And so, well, I have a monitor that I look in the room and I'm watching him all night. It's like, okay, well, that's helpful, but are you sleeping because you're watching the monitor all the time? What can you do? Where's the balance you can get between appropriately creating a safe environment for your child, but allowing you to get good rest? So what are your behavioral sleep problems? Going into the room because the BiPAP mask comes off, going into the room because the alarms are going off, the pulse ox alarm is going off, having to reattach the mask. These are all things that need to be done. This is where you can work with your specialist to help adjust the alarms on the settings so maybe they're not so sensitive that they're going off all the time. Making sure you have a good mask fit if a child needs or a young man needs BiPAP so that it's not sliding off. Regular things that have nothing to do with sleep. Is the child uncomfortable? Are they having muscle spasm? Can they not roll over when they need to? Are you going in to roll over a lot? Can something simple as getting a hospital bed that has a rocking motion that constantly changes the position, can that help your child sleep through the night? And as a result, you get a better night's sleep. So, I mean, these are all things to do. For the families that have children who are, or young men who are more advanced in their disease, if you have home duty nursing, can you arrange for maybe the nurse to be working a night shift that you can sleep? Last week, I saw one of my older Duchennes. He's 38 years old. He's doing great. He's on BiPAP 24/7, and he's holding down 2 jobs and living life. But he used to be tired all the time because he was so scared about going to bed. And with the help of our social worker and the insurance company, we were able to switch his shifting of nurses around for a night nurse. He sleeps like a rock now. He says, I love it. I can go to bed. I don't have to worry. I know my needs are going to be taken care of. And the mom and dad are like, we sleep better too now. We don't have to worry anymore. So, is there things you can do that have nothing to do with the actual equipment or your child's behavior to add resources in? Having a night nurse, having a night aide, maybe having, occasionally taking shifts. One parent stays up for a little bit later, one gets up a little bit earlier to help out. There's lots of strategies. Work with your team, work with your child, work with the siblings, see what can we do to help all of us get a good night's sleep. And I will add, medication is not the answer. It's creating an environment where you can sleep comfortably and safely.
Thank you. Wow, that's a lot. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. What brought to mind is we had a lot of conversation on it yesterday, but really it's about that communication, and really talking with the family, talking with your providers to really come to develop a plan that works for everyone involved. But bringing it back to, that's part of the burden too, is that, carrying all of that, knowing, and then making choices, and how do I prioritize, and how do I take away that guilt, and how do it becomes very heavy. So, I'd love to pull you in, Lori. 3 children in 3 years, they're older now, but they're still, so, I'd love to see, what's kind of the supports that you turn to help you with, managing the burden.
Yeah. So I had to start kind of early on because my husband, after I had Lydia, my 3rd child in 3 years, was home for like a week with me, and then he traveled. So he was really, he worked full time for an international company. And so I had to figure it out kind of how to do it on my own from the beginning. As they've gotten older, obviously things have gotten harder. My husband passed away. Lydia just moved out a month ago at age 22. So now I'm home with Ben and Sam, 23 and 25. I would say there are several places that I looked. As soon as the kids were diagnosed, I was right away wanting to meet someone else in the Duchenne world. And God was really good to introduce me to a beautiful couple, and got involved with Johnny and Friends, which is an organization for families with disabilities. My church stepped up. Today, we have several people from our church community that will come and spend time with Ben and Sam, so that I can get out of the house, or just so that they have more connection. The church built a ramp onto our our stage so that Sam can play music and help lead worship on Sunday mornings. Also, I got involved with a Duchenne group here called the Gals for Cal, and here in New England, and we do sprint triathlons to raise money for Duchenne. So kind of having a little tribe around you really helps. My family, my extended family is very busy. Often, I think we get disappointed in our own family members, extended family, because they either don't want to or don't have the capacity to kind of help. So you have to look elsewhere. And Dr. Kravitz, when Lydia was planning on moving out, I'm thinking, I'm sleep deprived now. How am I ever going to do this by myself? And if you had told me that I could get a nighttime caregiver 2 months ago, I would say you're crazy, because we have all these hours and we can't find any caregivers. Like, there's this shortage, and I've been looking for 5 years. Well, do you not know we now have 4 nights covered from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. where I can sleep, and they're sleeping in Lydia's room and they're taking care of the boys. And it's you have to look. It doesn't always drop in your lap. You have to look, but the support is out there.
Yeah, you have to ask for help and then be willing to accept the help once you've asked for it. Taylor, I'd love to pull you in to kind of talk about that. How do we ask for that help and then accept it?
Yeah. I live in Utah. It's a very religious state, a very religious community. And, there's pros and cons to that, of course, but one of the pros is that typically there's a lot of like, what can we do to help, right? Like, the communities are very involved in like service and providing that support. Unfortunately, a lot of that, sometimes looks like, can I bring dinner over, right? And of course, I'm sure, many of you have been offered like the dinner offer, right? And it's great, but it's not necessarily always what you need. And that being said, it's hard to ask for something else. And so sometimes when I'm working with patients and it's clear that there's a need for additional support, I encourage them to make a list of everything possible that they would love to have help with. Everything from something realistic to something wildly unrealistic, and just list it out, write it down. And then when people ask you in your community, in your religious community, in your neighborhood community, in your family community, hey, what can I do to help? You can go to that list and immediately pull something from it. And like, actually, you could come over here between 12 and 1 tomorrow afternoon and just like sit with, whoever, right? Or actually, I really haven't had time to go to the grocery store this week. If you could go and like pick up these things, or actually, I would love to be able to take a nap, right? And it's so much easier when you have a physical list that you can pull from in the moment, and really like provide specific things that people can help with who are willing to do so. I find that people are really willing to help. They just don't really know how. And so there's always that kind of classic dinner offer, and you can have a million casseroles in your fridge, and it's like, this isn't helpful to some degree. It ends up being kind of stressful, actually. And it is hard to ask for help. And I think that list is helpful because it kind of takes that extra step away from you of having to think of something, and then kind of gives you the courage to just look at it and then just ask. And people will rarely say no, usually because they feel uncomfortable saying no. And I tell patients, like, take that. That's great. If they feel uncomfortable, that's not your problem. Take the offer and be able to, give something specific, and making that list is a great exercise, I think. So that's one suggestion.
Also an eye opener to see how much is on that list. So, oh, you're right. I really do need some help.
That's a great point. Yeah, you can see actually how much you have to do when you kind of physically list that out.
Yeah, for sure. Marisa.
Well, I think what's interesting too is, Taylor, what you said about people offering to help. I found there's sort of a scale for that. And when your child's newly diagnosed and you're, in the trenches and it's very new and it's very fresh, everybody comes to your aid, and they're like, what do I do? How can I help you? And at that time, you're in the very earliest throes of grief, and just, you're trying to just literally breathe. And so it's very hard to say, oh, you can help me with this, because you don't know what you need, right? And I, by the way, I'm always good for a dinner. Anybody who wants to drop dinner on my porch, that is, I always do love that. But I think the part of this that shifts is that I always equate it to a funeral, right? Like everybody shows up at the funeral and then they go to the luncheon and they all go home and they just live their life again. And you're standing there going, hey, wait a minute. I'm just starting this journey and I need people. And we're just not sometimes hardwired for that. And culturally in the United States, we don't honor that kind of grief, and we don't stick it out with each other for the long haul the way some other cultures do. So what I've learned is that this was very difficult, but rather than hoping and waiting for people to check in on me and come to me and say, hey, Marisa, what do you need? We have to really adopt this sort of humbleness to be able to say, hey, I need help, or I need you to check in on me. And it's incredibly difficult for people to do that sometimes. And that's, that's a whole nother panel discussion we could have, is why we struggle so much to be really humble and say, I'm struggling and I need help. But I encourage a lot of families to ask for help just by the nature of what I do through Team Joseph. And what I tell people is there's somebody out there watching you, and they need to see you ask for help, because by the very nature of you asking for help, you're giving somebody else permission to ask for help. And we need to lead with that kind of open heart humbleness, where we're okay with saying, I'm not okay. And I love that we're having this conversation today about, what we call the burdens. I don't know if, if you guys have talked about this yet today, because I couldn't watch the opening session, but today is International World Mental Health Day, designated by the World Health Organization. And when I think about all of these things, the sleep, like, Dr. Kravitz talked about sleep, and you gave us such great information about those very tangible and tactical things. But I think if we go back even further, maybe to a higher level view of what happens with parents not sleeping, it gets wrapped up in all of these things, not here in our head, but here in our heart. And it's about grief, and it's about stress, and it's about fear. And I think once we can start opening up and asking for help with all of these burdens, it lessens the load on us, and it makes our household a happier place.
Mm-hmm.
You made me think about all the guilt too, right? Leaving the guilt at the door too, because there's no place for it, So yeah, no.
I would add, I just had a session with a family a couple days ago, earlier this week, and we did a lot of work around practice. Like this particular patient that I was seeing was having a really, really hard time asking and feeling so guilty whenever she needed to ask for help. And we did a lot of practicing around some cognitive behavioral therapy around this idea that you can rewrite the narrative in your head of the guilt that's associated with asking for help. And so instead of like asking, her caregiver, like, I need some water, I need such and such thing. And then feeling like, oh, like, I don't want to inconvenience them. This is so uncomfortable. I hate putting this person, in this uncomfortable kind of inconvenient position. Just rewriting it and saying something like, I'm going to ask for water. It feels uncomfortable to me, and it's not that big of a deal. This person's happy to do this, right? And just adding this kind of additional, like, and it's not this, and it's not that much, and it's not that big of a deal. And just practicing that when you are asking for help. And this, I think, you're kind of recarving that neural pathway that kind of puts you on alert when you feel so panicked about asking for help. Just kind of retraining your brain to relax, calm down. It's okay. People are happy to help. People want to help.
Yeah. And I think
I was going to add one thing. Also, if you're not well rested, it's hard to get your thoughts together. And stuff that is really only this big, again, seems this big. So getting yourself some rest allows you to tackle the problems that are going to be coming your way and give you the strength to ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say each one of our children are individuals and different. I have one son who is so afraid to ask for help. He just does not want to bother anyone. And I have another one who is like a drill sergeant. He knows what he wants, and he, it's your job, I can't do it, it's your job. So, and so my older son often is asking for my younger son because so I think we have to give them permission, like Taylor said, and I kind of like what you said there, and I'm going to try to use that with Sam a little bit. And I also think not only do we give permission to other people to ask for help when they see us asking, but it's also more blessed to give than it is to receive. And when I bring someone a meal at church, or when I, offer to help someone else, I feel good. Like, yeah, I have a busy life and I have a lot of burden, but I like to be the one to give once in a while. And I think everyone does.
My aunt doesn't like birthday presents. On her birthday, she gives presents to others. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there is something about the giving that, yeah, I think, I was thinking, I can't remember who spoke and made me think of it, but, another component of this is, I think, for our sons affected by Duchenne, that they worry about me, like as mom, right? Like Will holds back a lot of things because he doesn't want to put more on my plate. He doesn't want me to worry too, but, but that's not necessarily a good thing for him too, so like he's kind of carrying a burden in a sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I'd love to kind of talk through that, like thinking about from their perspective, from our sons' perspectives, or our daughters, how can we mitigate that and help them through that too? And I think it's also leading with grace and being examples, but I'd love to talk a little bit from that angle.
That's a big one, Tiffany.
Yes, it's huge.
I think, I'll share something quick that crosses my mind often about the guilt factor for our boys. And I think for me, in our household, it comes down to what's the emphasis that we place on Duchenne? How much time and energy do we give it when we don't have to? And there are certain things that are unavoidable, but it doesn't have to become the center of everything that we do. It just doesn't. Right. And I think that we are so focused, and rightfully so, on what do we need to do for our boys and what do they need. But something that I've done with Joseph, so Tiffany, you said this in the beginning, so Joseph is 19 and he just started college, and he's away at college and on a Big Ten campus, and it's just, it was incredibly difficult to let him go. And I say that, and then what I'm going to say to you is, but it wasn't my place to let him go. He wasn't mine to let go. He was going to go all along. And when we were prepping for like all the situations that could come up, and we talked about everything, the needs he could have, getting stuck somewhere, his power wheelchair running out of a battery, getting stuck on the lawn of trying to go to a frat party, all of those things that are like real life for college. I was so focused on what he might need and my fears, because it's scary to let him go. But the thing I said to him, and I said this numerous times to him throughout his life, before he left, I said, Joseph, you have to remember, we're going to need a lot of help. You need a lot of help there in order to make this happen. But what I want you to remember is that you have something to offer too. And I want you to focus on that. You have a purpose. You have gifts. There are people, as much as you need people there are people waiting for you at Michigan State. They need you, and they don't know it yet, and you haven't met them yet, but you have to remember that you have more to offer than you need. And that's still like that breaks me down, because I think we're so focused sometimes on fixing our boys, on a treatment and a cure and all the equipment they need, and how do we fix this and how do we navigate that. And sometimes I look at Joseph and I think, does he need to be fixed? He is so perfect, and he's so beautiful, and he's so incredible, and he's such an amazing kid who's grown into an amazing young man, that if we can focus a little bit more on that, then all the burdens and the struggle and the grief, it changes everything in our whole environment, and it changes them. And And I can tell you that Joseph's there away at college and he's got a purpose and he's a great friend to people. He's befriended people who needed a friend.
That's right.
So there's more than just, we have to fix everything.
Great. Yeah, no, yeah, I wouldn't change Will one inch of him. Yeah, and I think we could all say the same. And I think if we start thinking about our sons as our sons first, they just happen to have Duchenne,
Yeah,
and living and embracing,
I think we hesitate to say things like this because it feels like we don't acknowledge how devastating it is, right? And there is a concept in mental health, and it's duality, and it's that we can feel grief and we can feel joy at the same time.
Absolutely.
And we can want so desperately to have a cure for our boys, but we can think they are incredible and amazing, and we can live a life of celebration while we're still hoping that there will be a cure for them. And it just comes down to where we focus most of our energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's this phrase, joy isn't getting what you want, it's appreciating what you already have. And we could spend all of our time, sad and depressed, and like you said, making Duchenne the center of our lives. But we have so much in this country, in our own families, with our own children, that focus on the positives, and sorrow and suffering and joy, they have to exist together. You can't have a sunrise without the darkness,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Wong said that yesterday. You have to have the rain, the light and the dark, so you can have a rainbow,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and Tiffany, that's just life. Like after Joseph was diagnosed, my mom was still alive, and I used to tease her and say, why did you raise me, making me think that life was like all rainbows and unicorns? Like, why didn't you tell me how hard it is? And it's not unique to us. It's just life. It's filled with a lot of joy, but also a lot of sorrow. And there's a beauty in accepting that.
Yes.
All of us are, all of our guys are young adults now, young men, and, thinking about newly diagnosed families that I meet, and it takes me back to when Will was diagnosed, and that insane, intense urgency to fix it right now. I talked about it yesterday too. Like I can't even put it into words, the magnitude of that. And I wish we could figure out a way how we could give what we know now to them. Could we package it up and just deliver it and say, it's going to be okay. If you choose to live in the now and embrace the moment, plan for the future, but the live in the now component, all those cliche things, you really have to live it, think it, do it, embrace that. And, I'd love to kind of talk through, is there a way? I mean, of course, we're doing some of that right now by really just talking heart to heart, but is there a way, maybe Taylor, you could kind of navigate us through ways that us that have been on this journey for a bit of time can help those that are newly, part of entering for the beginning. So
I really like that, plan for the future, but live in the present piece. I do think it's important to, like you said, almost bring yourself back, get into that space of feeling overwhelmed, feeling panicked. That allows for us to hold space and empathy for individuals who find themselves in that position, because it is overwhelming and it can feel, once you've had all the wisdom, once you've had, the years and years of seeing it's all going to be okay, it can feel hard to, dive back in, and it can be triggering and a little bit overwhelming in some ways too. As we've been talking, one of the things that I thought of that I have a private practice on the side where I see patients who have, varying neurological and chronic diseases. And one of the things that we talk about in therapy all the time is the goal of therapy isn't for the hard things to go away. That's impossible. That will never happen. Life will always be hard, and it will always have difficult challenges, no matter who you are, no matter what burden has been placed upon you. But the goal is to be able to manage and like undertake and to face the challenges in kind of like healthy and positive and manageable ways, right? And so when you ask the question of like, how can individuals who, you know, have been through this, you know, help and support people who have not, I think that's an important reminder, right? Like to embrace and to hold space for those challenges, but to help provide healthy and supportive coping skills and support for people to be able to face those challenges and not have it completely overwhelm you, right? I use the analogy of if you're driving in a car, you want like your emotions and your challenges and like the Duchenne to be in the passenger seat while you're driving the car, rather than, you know, the emotions and the Duchenne and the challenges driving the car while you're in the passenger seat, right? We're not trying to get rid of it. It's not reasonable. It's not healthy to kind of push emotions away, to push the challenges away, to ignore them. Those are all unhealthy coping skills. We want them to be with us on the car ride, but we want to be driving the car, right? We don't want them to be driving the car. And so just framing it in that way, how can I help this person transition from a space of this panic, this challenge is driving, and help them kind of drive the car themselves?
Yeah.
That's a good analogy. You know, as a physician, you know, I got all these medical things I do, but I'm hopefully doing more than that in my practice. And I learned so much from my families. They teach me practical workarounds, emotional workarounds, emotional stressors, that stuff that I might not have recognized 20, 30 years ago when I was just starting out, that I now recognize in parents and stuff. So you guys teach me, you teach all of us in the muscular dystrophy team what's going on. And then we use that and then play it back to other parents. So we're not so clever, we think of all this stuff on our own. You guys teach us a heck of a lot. I like to think it makes me a better practitioner. To be honest with you, it also makes me a better father with my daughter. She's blessed not to have any medical problems, but that doesn't mean she's not a teenager with all that brings in. Hearing what you guys do and how you handle complicated problems, I take that into account when I'm dealing with her. So you guys have a lot to teach us. And even though we don't always look like we're listening, trust us, we are. And we're learning too. And that's why it's a team. And when we talk about this, a care team, it's not the providers and the families, it's everyone. You know, you guys are the captain of the ship. We're here to help you stay on the course you want to chart for yourselves.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kravitz.
Oh, so I was saying before we started this session today, because I've been going through all of these sessions, like to Taylor's point, I've been deep in my well. So I've been going back, reminiscing about day of diagnosis and watching my children grow up, and you know, my daughter goes away to college and my son's here, and that separation between, you know, it's yeah, but it's been a beautiful life. I mean, and that's the thing. And I think that's something I just want to make sure, you know, that everyone can you put Duchenne on the side? Yeah, put it in the back seat, put it in the trunk, you know, and drive it. I mean, I always say, let Will drive the bus, like, you know, let Emily drive the bus. Like, that's what it's about. Like, what's their path, and let them go, you know, and we all have a purpose. So yeah, anyway, we're actually closing in on our time. I can't believe it. We have about 5 minutes left. So I'd love to just kind of take this 5 minutes and really kind of think of some parting words, parting gifts that we can give to these attendees here and for us. So who would like to start us off?
I'll start. I think being able to journal your feelings, as I started journaling early on, and I can go back and I can read how I felt back then, and I can see, it helps me to see that things aren't as difficult as I thought they were going to be. Journaling is a great thing. Also, I think exercise, getting out, my husband used to always say, oh, you need those endorphins, and I'm like, you're right, I do. I need to get out and go for a run, or go to the gym, go for a swim. They think that's healthy. And then for me, reading God's word is always helpful. And I always go to the Psalms when I'm feeling either sad or anxious, or there's one Psalm 94:19 that says, "When the cares of my heart are many, your consolations cheer my soul." And just knowing that God is in control, that we don't have to control everything, I think is helpful as well.
I will, thank you for those words. I'll jump in. I would say I'm biased. I know I am, but find a therapist, see a therapist. I think the value of
Yes.
having an unbiased professional to be able to complain to talk to process with, it's invaluable. It really is. You're allowed to feel frustrated and to want to complain and to need an outlet. You're allowed to have and experience all of those things. And regardless of whether you acknowledge it or whether you seek out someone to have that as a resource, you will experience those things, and they will come out sideways in ways that often are destructive or problematic, or affect your family, affect your children, affect your partner, whatever that looks like. And so I highly encourage you to find, even if it's not a long-term thing, even just kind of like a temporary mental health professional, just to be there as that person for you. And the other piece I would say is, we hear of coping skills as, like you say, like you mentioned, Laura, like exercise, good sleep. There's kind of the traditional the kind of run-of-the-mill sort of gambit of coping skills that are, healthcare professionals often recommend. I would say get creative. It doesn't need to be kind of the standard exercise, sleep protocol. Those things are wonderful, and also there are many other things. There's a lot of research indicating right now that for us to kind of remove ourselves from what we call like a stress response cycle, or kind of the cycle we enter into when we experience a stressor, things like creative expression, coloring, listening to music, crying, physical affection, a good conversation, body movement. I like that word a little bit better than exercise, even, because it can mean anything. It doesn't have to mean like something rigorous or intense. There's so many ways and so many things that you can do to take care of yourself, and you can get creative with them. It doesn't need to be maybe something you have a negative association with, but it is important that you do. And it's important that you're engaging in these techniques to exit yourself out of this kind of a stress response cycle. And like someone mentioned earlier, like putting on your own mask before you put on someone else's. You will be a better caregiver, a better parent, a better person if you prioritize your own needs. So that's what I would say. I know it's easier said than done as well. It's easy to sit here and do those things, and it's a whole other thing to implement them into practice. So even if it's just a couple minutes a day, prioritizing that time.
Yes.
And I would follow that up with, don't be scared about sharing how you feel with your team, whether you have a therapist or not. You have a healthcare team filled with various specialists of different types. You don't have to compartmentalize each organ system to each specialist. You can say what's on your mind, tell them what your hopes are, your fears are, share them with them. If you can put words to how you feel, you can then start handling the problem better. So don't be afraid. We're here to help you out in any way that we can. And it, just like you had said, it makes you feel good to bring a dinner to, Lori, what you said about bringing a dinner to someone makes you feel good, is that when you opened up to us and we can do something to help you ease the burden, it makes us feel good too. And we learn for the next family so that we're even better. So don't be afraid to share.
Marisa?
I think I would just say, kind of piggybacking on what Taylor said, if you're, newly diagnosed, or if you've been in this for a long time, or I think that it's okay to say that whatever you're feeling at any given moment is exactly what you're supposed to be feeling. and to acknowledge all of it. And in terms of having somebody to talk to or getting some help, we did an episode of this on our podcast where I brought on my own counselor, and people will say to me, gosh, I wouldn't have thought you had a counselor. You seem like you're happy. And I'm like, that's because I have a counselor. And you know, we don't wait to change the oil in our car until the engine is burning up, right? So you don't need to be in a desperate place. You can be feeling really good and just say, hey, I want to stay here, so I want some help with that. The other thing that I just want to say, because I deal with, you know, get the privilege of helping so many families, is, you know, Duchenne isn't all that families are dealing with. And I just want to put that out there as we talk about best practices and standards of care. And, you know, we drop sometimes, we didn't end this session, but I know as a collectively, sometimes we use the word should a lot, and everybody's dealing with their own stuff. And I know some families out there, this is one little thing in their family they're dealing with, and they have so much else on their plate. In addition to Duchenne, it might be a job loss, another, you know, a mental health issue, another child with a really serious issue. And so I think what I just want to end with for myself is saying, when we talk about best practices or suggestions, or when we talk about quality of life, the only person who gets to define that is you. Everybody gets to define what quality of life means to them. And it's not the same for everybody, nor should it be, nor does it have to be. So, you know, ask for help, look for suggestions, but don't compare yourself, because your journey is your own. It's nobody else's.
Do that. Beautiful, beautiful. This was absolutely beautiful. Thank you guys so very much for spending your Sunday morning and afternoon with me and our viewers here today. It was absolutely beautiful. And yeah, we will ease the bird, live in the moment. So thank you guys so much, and we will see you soon.